Welcome to episode 4 of Disruption and Kindness. I'm Travis Swearengen, and I'm sitting here with my partner, Caleb Monroe.
Hi.
And we're here to talk about brands, businesses, and how they impact culture. But first, we're actually doing our first parental advisory because the subject matter that we're talking about today might be a little much for kids. And we know so many of you guys listen to this in your car, on your way to take them to school or on your way to work. And we just wanted to give you an opportunity to change over to some good music or another podcast and maybe listen to this when you guys have some time. But yeah, roll the titles. What's up, dude?
Man, life is fast right now.
Right.
Yeah, extremely fast.
How things been going for you?
Good. It's when you add a podcast in on top of your current workload, there are things that just need to be shuffled around. And so for us right now, we're just in a really good, fast place. But for me, I'm enjoying it. I actually look forward to filming this podcast. The feedback that we've gotten has been really, really good. But
Sure.
Yeah, I would say this past week has been fast. What about you?
I actually haven't been at my best this week. If I'm being completely real, like I put a lot on myself, and so if I have an off week where I feel like I'm less productive, I get really hard on myself.
Yeah.
I think it's because I have this tendency to put way more on myself than I need to, and we've talked about that in the past. But
Yeah.
it's just kind of something that I think needs to be talked about. Some is just that I think as business owners and entrepreneurs, I think we need to learn how to show ourselves grace. And I am absolutely terrible at it. Like I'll think back to, how I used to work in 2017 and 18 whenever I was, working for another agency and just grinding 24/7, and I'd put in 16-hour work days constantly. And I'll sometimes think back to that and go like, why can't I tap into that energy that I used to have, or why can't I put out that kind of output that I used to anymore? And I can get really, really hard on myself really fast, and so I've got to learn how to pull myself out of that.
Yeah, and I think there's like a quote that's like, if you want to go fast, go alone.
Yeah.
If you want to go far, go with others.
Right.
And I think as business owners, especially when you're single and you have the energy and this is everything, you throw yourself into it. And starting a business and getting that initial momentum to where it actually begins to carry itself requires that kind of dedication and output like you're talking about.
Sure.
But I think that when business owners, like one of the best things that they can learn is learning the season that they're in and actually giving the effort for where you're at.
Right.
And I think going at 120 miles an hour or giving 100% of yourself constantly, you're just asking for burnout.
Sure.
I think taking advantage of the lulls in business and taking advantage of when you will allow you to re-energize yourself to actually apply yourself when there are moments, there are crises, there are things that need to happen and change that way. But learning not to pull too much onto yourself, I think, is an incredibly good thing to learn. And your point about not having a lot of grace for yourself, I think that almost every single person listening to this podcast can empathize with that. I think that I look across at you and I want to take things off of your shoulders, and I see your situation and want to help you that way.
Right.
But I don't extend that same level of grace to myself when I'm dealing with my own issues, right? I expect to be better than that. I should know more. I should not be struggling with this right now, and we don't extend that same grace to ourselves. So I think it's incredibly healthy.
Oh yeah, I just get in my head, I'm like, man, you used to be able to tackle all of this stuff at one time, or you used to be able to knock it all out, and it's just silly because it's I don't know, it's just unhealthy and not good. But yeah, so that's kind of an area that I'm trying to grow in this week, and probably in like subsequent weeks, is like learning how to extend grace to myself when things are going crazy. I've had an insane year.
Yeah.
And trying to, I feel like I was hustling super, super hard, and then my dad died, and then everything just kind of derailed for a while, and it's been really hard for me to like get back to the same level of output that I used to be at, or that I'm used to working at. And so trying to let myself get back on the horse slowly, I think is important, because I think I might have come back too soon.
Yeah. There's no blueprint to grieving.
Right.
And I'm not trying to get too far left field for what the podcast is supposed to be talking about, but I know that Travis Gibson and me just we know that there's no blueprint to grieving. I think just
Right.
American culture in general is really bad at
Right.
allowing people to grieve and have space to not be okay, because you're not going to be okay for a while.
Sure.
And so I think that like our agency in general is giving a ton of space for you to be able to not be okay, to not have it all put together. And so that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Like one thing that is always just super, super exciting for me week to week now is doing this show.
Sure.
Because we've gotten like a lot of really cool feedback and people are enjoying it. And one thing that people like love the most, or I think the fan favorite episode so far has been episode 2.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's been because we did the juxtaposition between corporate and professional and
Personable and friendly.
personal and friendly. And so I think we're going to do that again
Yeah.
today. So I think we've got this brand exercise just for people that are just tuning into this episode for the first time. We have a brand exercise that we walk all of our clients through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important. Monsoon at its core is a brand first digital agency.
Yep.
And so we could take the poorly communicated brand that a lot of businesses have and just throw a ton of traffic at it
Mm-hmm.
and hope to make sales. Like if we throw enough people at it, money will come out. That's a given. But that doesn't always benefit the client. And
Sure.
so we make sure that before we market you, before we do any content for you, before we make a website, before we even do a logo,
Right.
that we do a huge deep dive into your culture and who you are and who you want to be. And so this is one of the spectrums that we throw at them, and we ask people if their brand is spontaneous and high energy or careful thinking and planning.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, like Travis is saying, we offer this because as designers, I want to make sure that I'm giving someone, whether it's a business card or a website, I want to make sure I'm giving them something that completely encapsulates their culture and what they're authentically carrying.
Right.
I don't want to make promises when I'm building a website out and setting expectations on what kind of experience people can expect for you as a business. And I think that your brand is one of the only distinguishing factors that you have versus your competition.
Sure.
Most people's competitors are offering the exact same products or services, albeit with slightly different price points. But you kind of get it. Hey, plumber, I have a problem, a clog in my sink and drains. Okay,
Right.
Every plumber will go unclog it. You're not differentiating yourself or gaining traction or appeal by just talking about your product or service. And so for us, we like to deep dive. We're a brand focused agency. We deep dive into who are you actually and where are you wanting to go. And then we build all of our designs from that place. So
Right. And we remind our clients every time, and you're going to hear us say this quote on this podcast eventually, hopefully hundreds of times, is that your brand is not who you say it is. Your brand is who they say it is. And so when we're going through this exercise, what we're asking the client to do is to tell us, how are you wanting to portray yourself to others? This doesn't mean that you personally aren't spontaneous and high energy, but if you're running a company where your clientele really value a careful thinking and planning kind of partner, then we need to portray that to them. And I think what's really nice about this spectrum is it's a lot less, I think we get a lot less tension points
sure.
on this one than we do with the previous one, because you'll get these guys that are like, yeah, we're corporate and professional, but we build all of our businesses on relationship. And so we're personable and friendly too. And so we almost always deal with that tension point on that one, where they're like, we're friendly, but we're very professional. We've got our stuff together. And it's like trying to get them to kind of pick one so that we can really over-index on that and lean into it. It can be difficult. But with this one, I think it's a lot more cut and dry.
Yeah, when you look at spontaneous and high energy brands versus careful thinking and planning brands, you're going to pretty quickly know which one your client base is appealing to. For example, an accountant. I would say almost 100% of accounting firms are probably going to be careful thinking and planning brands.
You do not want a spontaneous accountant.
No.
Ever.
No, where it's high energy, entertainment, kind of kooky approach to, you don't want that inside of an accounting firm. So it's pretty
Right.
easy for most people to determine where they want to be. I think the hard part is that we have lots of businesses that we talk to where we're specifically talking to the sole proprietor or owner of the company, and they have a brand that isn't built after themselves. So they're answering this question as, what am I personally?
Sure.
Am I spontaneous and high energy, or is my business spontaneous and high energy? And creating that separation, I think, is really important. Now, if you've named your company like a lot of real estate agents or photographers, and it's Caleb Monroe Photography, then your answers are going to be the same. You're attracting that person to you. You're attracting them to me, so it can be the same. But for a lot of companies, like Monsoon or McDonald's, there's no direct relational connection point. So what the CEO of McDonald's is personally should not dictate what McDonald's as a business is for their branding. So creating this separation to where we've talked to a ton of people who are spontaneous and high energy, and yet they're leading brands that their clients really want them to be on the careful thinking and planning side. It doesn't mean that they're a bad fit or that they're unenjoyable, but knowing whether or not you are personally applying this to yourself and you carry that into your business, I think is important. So we don't get tension points like you discussed as much, but I've had people who are very spontaneous, very high energy, very gregarious and bubbly individuals, and are trying to make that their brand, and they don't realize how they're harming the people that are coming in. They're like, hey, I'm just needing a tax return done. Like, I'm not needing you to be super bubbly right now, right?
Sure.
This is more of an efficiency game, and they don't understand the disconnect that's happening there.
It's about understanding who is your customer, what are their problems, and what are they expecting, right, out of your company. So if, again, it's not about suppressing who you are as a person. It's about when we create marketing campaigns for you, when we make a website for you, when we make a logo for you, and like you're trying to portray yourself and to attract your dream customers, what is the tonality of that effort, right? Who are you trying to portray yourself as? We never want you to suppress your personality or anything. Well, that's always where the hang up is.
Right.
It's your brand is not who you say it is. It is who they say it is, and you can only influence it. And all we're trying to do is influence it one direction or the other.
Right. So with spontaneous and high energy, I just want to break these down just a little bit more. I think neither of these are negative, as we say in our branding exercise. It's not bad to be careful thinking and planning. It's not bad to be spontaneous and high energy. Mm-hmm. It's situational, and it's dependent upon the industry, this one specifically. But spontaneous and high energy brands are going to be very entertainment focused. They're going to be things that people want to be carried along into, where they're kind of swept up into an experience. And so brands that are focusing on creating an experience can really lean into this spontaneous and high energy vibe, where people are pulled in and their expectations are exceeded because of how fast paced and how interesting. And so I think a lot of artists, for example, even some event planners, I say some because there are some event planners that really do like ride the line on careful thinking and planning, and they want you to know they have every single detail planned out. Right. But you have other ones that are much more creative, and they're look, imagine what we can do with this space, and that'll go over here, and this will go over here, and they're just creating in this ethereal energy space. And I think that those kinds of brands, like, it's a very positive thing.
Sure.
If I'm wanting something creative or I'm wanting something unique, like, I'm probably going to go to a spontaneous and high energy brand, especially for the unique aspect. The unique and the exotic, that's where spontaneous and high energy lives. And I think if you move over to careful thinking and planning, this is where you really build a lot of trust. Brands that are careful thinking and planning we know exactly what's going to happen. There will be no spontaneity. It's a tight ship, and we're going to reach the destination, and here's points A through Z, and this is exactly what's going to happen because we've done this so many times. So I don't want people to get confused, because there are sometimes high energy companies that need to still be careful thinking and planning. So for example, a whitewater rafting company, right? There's a lot of energy that's going on a whitewater rafting adventure, but you don't want your guide, the dude that's steering the boat, to just be spontaneous and high energy. He's like, hey, we're going to go down there. I've never been down this river before. We're going to have a lot of fun. You may die. Let's go. Like, that's not, you don't want that. You want the guy that's like, yep, I'm born and raised on this river. I've done hundreds of trips down it. We're not going to lose anybody. I know this thing like the back of my hand. And you're like, okay, cool. Now we can have a high energy experience because of how much careful thinking and planning. You don't want to parachute with someone that's just spontaneous, high energy, is not checking all the backpack, all the rigging, making sure everything is going to perform exactly the way that it's supposed to. There's so much careful thinking and planning that goes into skydiving.
Right.
So just because it's high energy doesn't mean it's not careful thinking and planning.
And these are what we call tension points
right.
in a brand. And because some brands can't perfectly fit within the mold of our workshop. It's not perfect.
Sure.
And so there are certain aspects or certain spectrums we have to like concede and go, yeah, you guys actually have to be both. Because someone's about to jump out of your airplane and you better have your stuff together.
Sure.
So, yeah, so I think it's definitely possible to be both in some instances, but like you really, really, really want to push one direction or the other typically.
Yeah, and I think even when you're talking about a skydiving company or a whitewater rafting company, I think we talk about, I'm forcing you to choose one of these. It doesn't mean that you're not the other one. It's just
right.
What foot are you leading with first? And I think that for skydiving, you probably want to lead with careful thinking and planning and safety first. I think the high energy part is kind of understood. We're doing something very high energy here. That's what's happening. But you really want to lean on the careful thinking and planning side, because once people feel safe, that's when they're allowed to experience the fun, when they know that there's no risk. Or minimal risk, I should say.
Sure.
So just which one are you leaning with first in this branding concept?
So Monsoon, are we spontaneous and high energy or careful thinking and planning, Caleb?
I think we're careful thinking and planning in the sense that I'm unwilling to move a project forward without figuring out who you actually are. I think once we know who you are, I'm fine running at a really fast pace. But I'm unwilling to just... cool, you're this. Let's run with it. And just be free to the wind. I think that we are creative, but it comes from understanding. There's a lot of strategy that goes into really carrying a brand.
Yeah.
I want to steep myself in somebody else's brand and really understand it to where I can communicate their brand better than they can. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, why are you hiring me?
Sure.
If I'm the guy building your website and I can't sit down and communicate your values, your culture, who you actually are, why are you having me build anything for you?
Right.
This isn't an efficiency game. Your brand is way too important to entrust with someone that doesn't actively carry and understand who you actually are and how you're trying to be.
Right.
Because I'm putting up a 24/7 billboard that's setting expectations for who you are as a company and what you're trying to bring people into. And if that's not aligned with who you are, that's working actively against people's experience. I know lots of companies that come to us and they say, listen, when we actually get the meeting with somebody, when someone sits down with us, our sales are incredible. We crush it when someone sits down.
Sure.
They're like, but we are struggling to even get those kinds of meetings. It's because your branding, your funnels, how people are interacting with you outside of that personal meeting isn't lining up with who you actually are. It's not attracting people in the same way that when you sit down, it's not being carried out throughout your other mediums. So it's incredibly important. Brand, I would say we're careful thinking and planning because I take such a severe strategic approach to understanding a business before we ever execute on the fun stuff.
Absolutely. So I'm going to take each of these sides of the spectrum, and then I want to know how companies can execute on this. So what are some good examples of like spontaneous and high energy brands, and like how can they execute? So we talked a bit about like event planners. So I'm getting married in December, and unfortunately we've had to move our wedding like 3 times because of COVID. And so I understand how much planning and insanity goes into planning a wedding because we've done it 3 times.
Sure.
And so for a wedding venue, like you said, like spontaneous and high energy, we're gonna have fun. It's your event. It's gonna be the best day of your life. But also, we've got this covered. We know we're gonna cover every corner of this event, and it's all gonna go off without a hitch.
Sure.
How can an event planner, and I know we have event planning clients that are probably watching this, and What can they be doing to communicate both of those things?
Yeah, again, it's what foot do you want to lead with first? And I think that especially for event planners, yes, the planning is literally in the name, but nobody wants to hire an event planner that's not going to create a memorable experience for
They
them.
want to have fun.
You're right. I don't care that you've planned it.
Sure.
If my wedding day is gray and dreary and boring and you have an organist playing me in, like, yes, you planned it and it's being executed correctly, but if it's not fun, if it doesn't carry high energy, if I'm not encountering something memorable and unique and lasting, that's what everybody wants on their dream day,
Sure.
you know? And so I think that which foot are you leading with? I would, on your website, showcase people having a great time at events that you've planned.
Right.
Or if you're a venue, showing off these people who are smiling and having an awesome moment, because that's going to say more than paragraphs and paragraphs of copy.
Right.
If I'm seeing people having a good time, that already aligns your brand with you are fun. This can happen here.
This is the
possible.
outcome I wanted.
Exactly.
Right.
Showing off that outcome and then following it up in the experience when someone's like, great, this looks like a fun venue. These people are having a great time. I want to reach out and contact you. Then you can have the careful thinking and planning side and make sure that it's going to go off without a hitch, right?
Right.
But the first thing that you need to prove, especially in that industry, is that people are going to have a good time. Otherwise, I might as well be getting married in a bowling alley, you know? Like, the venue only matters as much as the fun that you're going to attract people to, whether that's corporate parties or weddings, etc. Like, it doesn't really matter. So I would say lead with that, especially in that industry space. Lead with the fun. Lead with we can have a good time here, and then prove that on the back end after you develop that relationship and you've got that touch point that you're careful thinking and planning.
And that's an industry that operates with an attention point.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have companies in industries where they actually need to be one way or the other, what would be a good example of like you guys have got to be a spontaneous and high energy kind of brand?
Sure. Think about like Red Bull or Monster,
Okay.
especially what they've done with their branding, where they've really stepped into extreme sports,
Okay.
right? And I think that anytime you're doing extreme sports, whether you're Red Bull and you're jumping somebody out of a little weather balloon and
Right.
they're the human that's the highest altitude drop that's ever happened, right? Or you're Monster and you're really in the BMX scene and it's all high energy. Every trailer, every impact, every commercial is high energy. Crazy things are happening. But I think that like in the back of our heads, we know that if you stop and think about how much planning went into the things that these extreme sports people are doing, whether they're squirrel suiting through canyons or doing other stuff, like this is what they've aligned their brands with, is the spontaneous and high energy, but they don't showcase the amount of planning that goes into it.
Right.
They don't even spend a second showing you how much time they spent making this safe, because the point for them is that this is crazy. I've never seen anything like this. This is insane. And you're swept up into this moment where, yes, they're doing planning. They're putting a human miles above the surface of the earth. Like, yes, there's planning that goes into this, but they don't talk about it at all. Mm-hmm. They're really just full leaning into spontaneous, high energy. This is what they want, entertainment. So when you think about like Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar, these are the kinds of brands that are lining themselves up, especially as an energy drink company, to be that spontaneous and high energy brand, where even though they are doing planning, they don't talk about it at all.
So when we're talking spontaneous and high energy brands, I think that one of the most important things they can do to execute on trying to authentically carry that kind of identity mm-hmm. is you need to be putting out lots and lots and lots of fun content.
100%.
So if you are Rockstar Energy doing lots of promotional videos on your sponsored athletes doing these crazy stunts or
right.
sports or whatever, I think is really important. If you're that event planner, again, photos and lots of videos of your events and like showing people having a great time, you know, I think that's important. But for careful thinking and planning brands, that kind of content doesn't work.
Right.
And what kind of content do you think a careful thinking and planning brand needs to be putting out in comparison to a spontaneous and high energy brand?
I think the things that matter in careful thinking and planning spaces is less about the content as much as it is about the expertise.
Okay, so how can a brand like that showcase that expertise the best, do you think?
Sure. When you're talking about taxes, for example,
Right.
and say I'm trying to start a new company, I'm gonna have a very hard time breaking into a tax space when the other professionals that are around me, my competition, have 30 years in this space.
Okay.
If I'm just starting out, that's a hurdle because they're already proving that they have more experience than me. And in that careful thinking and planning space, expertise is really what swings the needle. In the venue space, when you're talking about spontaneous high energy, if you show people having more fun in your venue than the other venues, people are going to be attracted to you. In the careful thinking and planning space, I honestly think it's about expertise and proving that we know what the heck we're doing. We're really good at this. We've done this a long time, and there will be no mistakes because we know how to execute this because we've been executing on this for a long time. I think that's really where the proof comes in. So I think you really prove that with testimonials. I think you prove that showing off other companies who have used them and had positive experiences. I think there are ways to shore up your lack of expertise with a branding site, even if you want to be careful thinking and planning and you're new to the scene. You're kind of this underdog that's trying to break in amongst competition. Like, the best ways to prove that are getting solid testimonials from people that do have rapport in the community that you're in. You know, showing off logos of people that you've worked with, showing off testimonials, even detailing out your process and how you're going to either make it easy for people to go through, or that people can understand every step of the way. I think that's really how you showcase a careful thinking and planning side. So even in media, like having you pour over in a video, pour over something and be showing the amount of detail that you're taking. I think there's ways that you can showcase careful thinking and planning, but it's not as much like visually proven, I would say, as
You
like
really
the
need-
spontaneous and high energy ones would be.
You have to have that social proof.
Yep.
You have to see your peers using this company and enjoying it or trusting it.
Right.
We do this thing with our websites often called a logo salad, and we showcase all the companies that our company or our client's company has worked with. So if you're seeing, like, I don't know, if you're trying to hire Monsoon and you're seeing, you know, big brands like Coca-Cola and Nike and FedEx or whoever else, and you're going, oh, these guys have worked with this brand agency.
Right.
You're going to go, okay, these guys know what they're doing. And so you kind of want to do the same thing with a careful thinking and planning brand, where you can showcase the social proof, like you're saying, hey, these are your peers using our company. Here are the companies that use us and trust us. That's the kind of stuff that really builds a lot of expertise, or builds a lot of like faith in your expertise.
Right.
But also putting out really helpful like blog articles, like breaking down lots of different topics. Like, I think if you can take some of the more simple problems your clientele's having that they might not need to hire you for, and they can read your article and go and do something themselves. They go, oh, these guys are the experts in this field. They're the ones putting the content out.
Sure.
So whenever I've got a larger problem that is probably a little above my head, I'm going to come back to these guys and get some help.
Exactly.
You know? So
Building value that way is definitely important.
right. So like not just is the energy of the content created for these companies completely different, but even like the mediums of the content are going to be completely different.
Yeah. How you prove it is going to be different depending on the two. But
Sure.
anytime that we walk through this branding exercise, we tell people, listen, if you chose spontaneous and high energy, great. Now lean into that. Prove that. If you chose careful thinking and planning, great. Now lean into that. Prove it. Prove
Sure.
that you're careful thinking and planning. And look at this, look at your company, look at every single blog post that you're writing, video that you're putting out, etc. Put on a pair of glasses that says careful thinking and planning, and make sure that it's proving that whatever you're doing, whatever touch point, be consistent with it.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things that we're doing on the podcast, and something that people are really enjoying a lot of, is that we don't discuss topics at all before we get on the mic. If a topic comes up, we just will not discuss it. Or like, there's so many times we go, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, you know, because we want to be completely authentic and real on the mic. And this is no different, because we have not discussed this idea. But I'm going to play a game with you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go down a list. I'm gonna go down a list of brands, and I want you to tell me if they are spontaneous and high energy versus careful thinking and planning. I literally just typed this up as we were talking.
Okay. I literally have no clue what's about to happen, so let's go.
McDonald's.
Oh, man. Man, there's a piece of me that knows their business model on the back end, just as a business person,
Sure.
that wants to say careful thinking and planning because of how much goes into it. But I
Right.
think that as a brand, how they're presenting, it's spontaneous and high energy.
Yeah,
for
they
sure.
did the Travis Scott meal.
Right, exactly.
That's real spontaneous.
Uh-huh.
Netflix.
Spontaneous and high energy as well. Entertainment.
FedEx.
Careful thinking and planning.
First Bank and Trust.
Careful thinking and planning.
NFL.
Spontaneous and high energy.
Oracle.
Careful thinking and planning.
Coca-Cola.
Ooh. I'm still going to go with them as an entertainment. I think the majority of the times that they've made positive improvements have been their ads, really, really good advertising for their name. So I'm honestly going to say spontaneous. And
Careful
high
thinking and planning brands don't use Drake in their Sprite ads.
energy. Right. Exactly.
Burger King.
Spontaneous and high energy.
Cinemark.
Spontaneous and high energy.
JCPenney.
Careful thinking and planning.
Really?
I would say so. I think that JCPenney as a brand has had a crisis for decades.
Right.
My experience of them is careful thinking and planning and boring, and this is a grandma's store.
Okay. Toys R Us.
Dead?
They've well, right, but they've had the same problems JCPenney's did.
Right.
So are they still careful thinking and planning?
No, I don't think that you can careful thinking and plan or prove careful thinking and planning your way into a bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So as far as my experience, they have to probably be a little more on the spontaneous and high energy spectrum.
Shots fired at Toys R Us. Amazon.
Careful thinking and planning for sure.
Tesla.
Spontaneous and high energy.
But they're electric cars.
I know.
And
There's definite planning that goes
and
into
their
it.
CEO just sent dudes to space.
Yeah, spontaneous and high energy. That's what I'm saying. You don't, as a brand, launch a car into space without being spontaneous and high energy.
Dang, I guess I always thought of them as being like careful thinking and planning because they're sending people to space.
Right.
They're making electric cars.
But it's this experience. It's not the fact that they sent someone to space. It's that a Tesla and a little like astronaut is in space.
They did launch a Tesla into space. I'm glad they did that.
Where they're leaning, you lean on that from an entertainment perspective. That's super cool.
I cannot wait for the UFOs to find that thing.
Exactly. Like, I think that even in his presentations and the stuff that he's doing, like, I'm sorry, Elon, I love you a ton, but there wasn't a ton of careful thinking and planning that went into your second swing of that hammer on the power truck.
That's true.
Yeah, he rolled with it. It was spontaneous and
That's
it was
so
high
funny.
energy. Like the way he unveiled their semi truck and how it came out, like all of that. It's all showmanship. It's all entertainment.
Their Polygon truck.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Apple.
Oh my gosh. Apple as a brand has had a crisis since Steve Jobs, in my opinion. Like clearly they're crushing it as a company, but I don't know that their branding has been as strong as when Steve was there.
Do you feel like Apple was a personal brand the whole time?
Yeah, because when he disconnected,
I've always wondered.
they've struggled. Like, love Tim Cook. He's awesome,
Yeah,
but
he's
he's no
great.
Steve Jobs.
Right.
In terms of the pioneer. You don't take a photo of Tim Cook like holding his chin and like looking intently at a problem and get the same energy that you do when Steve Jobs is doing the same thing.
Like the whole Apple brand rallied so hard around Steve Jobs, more so than like Microsoft did for like Bill Gates.
Sure.
You know. So I've always kind of wondered, I'm like, was Apple actually a personal brand? I don't know.
I think Apple is careful thinking and planning. I think they try and be spontaneous and high energy, but they just haven't been innovative. And I think those things go hand in hand to me.
Well, because when I think of Apple, I think of the like the old like iPod commercials where there's like the silhouettes and there's
Sure.
dancing. There's like an alien dancing with them, or like
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think
They used to be. They
Okay.
used to be spontaneous and high energy.
and
now they're careful thinking and planning.
Okay, so they've
Now
shifted.
they're 100%. My experience with them is that you're really not innovating anymore. You're really not pushing the market or forward necessarily. Each of your offerings that you're coming out with are such minute changes.
Right.
And they're things that you're chasing from a cell phone perspective that other people have had for years. Like it's safe. And I
Yeah.
think they play it safe. I don't think they're risk taking anymore.
Okay.
So it doesn't feel like they're spontaneous to me.
Facebook.
Facebook's brand is so weird. They're kind of a chameleon one, and they're changing a little bit more now. But I honestly think they're careful thinking and planning.
Carol Thing and Planning. Google.
Careful thinking and planning.
Really?
For sure. Yeah, your little art pieces that you do every single day on your homepage doesn't change the fact that you're just this monster of a search engine that has to work correctly and is dynamically targeting people through careful thinking and planning.
The NBA.
Spontaneous and high energy.
Harvard University.
Careful thinking and planning.
That's the end of the game.
Hey, I like that game. That was fun.
Pretty interesting. I wanted to like 5 Fingers of Death brands.
Yeah, and I think some of them, like, I've had different experiences. I've had longer experiences with some of these brands that have shifted over time, whether they wanted to or not.
Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting.
For sure. Well, one of these brands on this list is actually the topic of our conversation today, and honestly the reason for our parental advisory at the beginning of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking about Netflix and their distribution and defense of the movie Cuties.
Yeah. Intro it for me.
Well, there's a movie that had just dropped on Netflix probably a week ago, maybe. I'm not sure. Called Cuties. And it is being accused of having pedophilic content
Mm-hmm.
and being extremely inappropriate
Yeah.
for to even create at all.
Sure.
And so a lot of people are trying to get Netflix canceled.
Yeah. There's been, I just want to come out and say, just on the front end, there was a lot of internal dialogue, even us putting it out there on Facebook. Like, should we tackle this as a topic? Because it is dramatically, it's a culture swing that is dramatically impacting a company called Netflix right now and their response. And we wanted to figure out whether we should talk about this or not. So just on behalf of the Disruption and Kindness guys, we want to come out and say anything that sexually exploits a child, we do not stand for.
At all.
Anything pedophilic in nature, we don't stand for. There is more than enough content and copy and conversation that's happening around the morality of this issue. We really want to discuss instead what's actually how Netflix's brand is being impacted by their decisions that they've made throughout the course of this snafu.
Well, when we originally were kind of spitballing the idea of even talking about this, I was really resistant because Disruption and Kindness is not going to be a political show.
Never.
This is not a place for us to air out our political beliefs or give our commentary on culture in general, but to discuss brands, businesses, and how those things impact culture.
Yeah.
How do brands and businesses impact culture? What are the moves they're making that impact culture? And when we were watching Netflix dig their heels in, we decided, well, this is specifically in our lane, and so
it became something worth talking about based on Netflix's response. I think anytime that there's a movement to cancel something, that doesn't deem it worthy of inclusion on the Disruption and Kindness podcast. But when you see something unique happening that we want to draw attention to, look what's happening in this moment, what Netflix has come out and said, and even the backlash that's happened from it, that's what we want to talk about here. I think that most of our listeners are going to know about Cuties, and it's been all over Facebook. It's been all over Twitter, especially. Twitter, the day after it came out, just to give a little background real quick, this started to become an issue when Netflix released the poster for Cuties. And it showed girls, and they were scantily dressed in their dance attire, and there was an outrage about that. And then Netflix came back and communicated, hey, we messed up. Our design team messed up. We misunderstood what this movie was supposed to be about, and they changed the poster. And that was in August. And so there was a lot of people at that point that were like, oh, okay, I get that. You made a mistake. That's fine. But then the movie came out. And after the movie came out, hashtag cancel Netflix was the #1 trending on Twitter just a few days back. It was a huge movement of people that were deciding to cancel Netflix over the release of this movie.
Sure. Maybe just to give like a synopsis of the movie, it's about a young girl that is in a religious family in France, and she's at the very beginning, like she's being told that like the importance of like modesty and conservatism based off of their beliefs.
Sure.
And then she meets a girl in a laundromat who is dancing to Spanish music, and she gets wrapped up in this whole story of her becoming this social media addicted
Right.
dancer throughout the film, and really the dancing scenes aren't even the worst part, but the dancing scenes were pretty rough. I mean, and it wasn't just the dancing; it was the camera angles and what they were kind of fixated on.
Sure. We want to just go out there and say that when we decided to actually talk about this, we went and sat down and actually watched it for ourselves.
Right.
So we sat down, want to put our money where our mouth is, actually understand. And I think we both kind of came in under the impression that this isn't going to be as bad as people are making it out to be.
We saw a lot of pushback from the other side saying, no, this isn't that bad.
Right.
Watch it.
Sure.
You guys are freaking out over nothing. And so we decided to actually give it a watch and see if the controversy really held up. And it's worse.
Right.
In my opinion, than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and I think our comment at the end of it is the best case for this being a very poor execution for what the director was trying to do is to just go watch the movie. Like, if you go watch the movie, you'll see what we saw, and it wasn't great.
And we're not gonna sit here and get into like the scenes or what it depicted. This is not we're not gonna give a movie review here. We're literally just trying to describe
why there's so much outrage.
Why there's so much outrage and how this is impacting Netflix specifically.
Exactly.
As a brand.
So on change.org, just a couple days back when I last checked it, there were over 600,000 signatures that people were saying, hey, I'm signing this because I've canceled my Netflix subscription. And 600,000 may seem like a lot, but just since the first quarter, Netflix has actually gained 26 million subscribers just since the first quarter of this year started. I'm assuming because of pandemic, there's not a lot for us to go do out there, but in terms of 600,000, that's a lot. Their churn rate, if you will, like as far as people that have like actually deactivated their account and stopped their subscriptions, it increased 8 times above what it normally is. So clearly there was a pretty major exodus away from Netflix because of this movie.
Absolutely. A lot, again, cancel Netflix was trending, and a kind of like a social media fad was to screenshot your email saying, hey, first name, sorry to see you go, and all that. And they would screenshot that and post it to kind of let them know, like, I actually canceled this and it's done. I'm not entirely sure how well that's going to hold up. I feel like everyone's going to be canceling Netflix or at least people that are disagreeing with the film are going to be canceling Netflix, and they're going to virtue signal and let everyone know they're against this stuff. And then Stranger Things season 4 is going to come out.
Sure. And
then Marvel's going to do another Netflix collab. Or we're going to get an update onto the To Make a Murderer guys. Are they still in prison? Do we know? And they're going to come back to Netflix because they took their stand, and no one has to know that they're getting back on Netflix.
Right. Or even the reality of Netflix is that one person is paying for it and 8 to 12 people are bumming off of it.
I've never paid for Netflix ever.
There you go. So as far as one person taking a moral stand, it's an interesting dynamic that's happening right now. But I want to really get into Netflix's response. So you have this huge cancel Netflix thing that went out, massively trending, #1 on Twitter.
Right.
If you go try and just Google Cuties right now, you can see the Google reviews. There's like 12,000 one-star reviews that people are putting out there. There's a lot of outrage around this topic. And I think that Netflix didn't do themselves a favor as a company with their response, where Netflix came out and hard dug their heels in on this topic. And
I have their actual statement pulled up.
Let's get it.
Can I read it real quick? Mm-hmm. Cuties is a social commentary against the sexualization of young children. It's an award-winning film and a powerful story about the pressure young girls face on social media and from society more generally growing up. And we'd encourage anyone who cares about these important issues to watch the movie. So they're posturing, saying, no. We are trying to showcase the sexualization of young girls because we're trying to take a stand against the sexualization of young girls.
Mm-hmm. And I think that while you can make a case for that, it's not standing up with most people. I think that kind of a response from Netflix isn't really hitting the mark. And it's interesting to see Netflix go hard defending a single title out of all of it, and to potentially risk losing such a large subscriber base over a single title that they got from Sundance, you know?
Right.
So it's interesting to me, just with business and branding in general, I don't subscribe a lot of morality to these companies. I think that every decision that they're going to make will have its roots started in money. So when I'm looking at Netflix and I'm looking at them defending it, like they're defending it for a monetary reason is where I come from on it. So the fact that they're tying their brand, here's the point I want to make. When a company has a controversy,
Right.
how they respond in that controversy is crucial. Because if they come to the defense of someone or something or an act that is controversial and they defend that, you are immediately tying your brand to saying, we support this.
Right.
So when Netflix is coming out and the brand perception, again, Netflix doesn't control it.
Right.
Netflix does not control the brand of Cuties. People's perception of this movie is that it's pedophilic. When Netflix comes to the defense of a movie that a lot of people are describing as a pedophile's dream, you immediately put that label on your company and you're saying that you support that. That's branding. That's perception. That's how public relations, PR, that's how it's handled. So that's an issue, and that's what we wanted to talk about here with Netflix, is when you take that kind of a stand as a business, when you put yourself on that side of controversy and you come out and you dig your heels in and you say, hey, I support this, you're immediately aligning yourself from the people that disagree with that controversy. You're immediately saying, this is who you are.
What drives me absolutely crazy about the situation with Netflix is they're trying to cry activism.
Sure.
That's ridiculous. You don't back a movie and claim it's to speak out against the sexualization of young girls and execute on that by actually sexualizing actual 11-year-old girls.
Actresses, yep.
Like I get it. If you're trying to create a social commentary on young girls becoming sexualized and being social media addicted and having all this pressure and all this confusion going on, like, I get it. I'm for it. You know, I have no issues with this being depicted, but the fact that they're using actual 11 to 13-year-old girls, the fact that they are actually filming them in the way that they did, like, again, it's our culture's been doing the dance moms things,
sure,
for like a decade. It's really a lot less about the dancing specifically for me, and it's the camera angles.
Yeah,
it's the two girls that got in a fight in the movie, and one of them pulls the other girl's pants down, and like the shot directly goes to the girl's butt, you know, and she's clearly a minor, you know. And I see people going, oh, well, there's this big cultural difference because it's a European film and the age of consent is like 15 over there. I'm like, well, then why are the girls 11?
Right.
Why are they 11 to 13? You don't get to come out and say, we're going to take on the sexualization of children by doing the thing that we're coming out against.
Sure.
That's ridiculous. And that's what Netflix is defending.
Right. I think if we're going to look at this objectively, I think you have a director who is tapping into something that is not okay, that's happening in society, that's being normalized. And her attempt was to try and start a conversation around it. Well, she definitely started a conversation around it, but her execution is what is raising eyebrows for you and for me when we watched it.
Right.
There are ways to tell a story and get a point across without doing the very thing you're saying is dangerous to the actresses that are in this movie. Like, that's the point that draws a line to me. If there was a problem in my city and I'm trying to raise awareness that there's a problem in my city of drug abuse or things that are happening, I don't call a town hall meeting together and go shoot up city council with heroin to display the problems of drug abuse in my city. Like, there's a way to have that conversation. And I think one of the best ways to do it that we were talking about is to actually sit down with people who have encountered that and get their story. Tell actual real stories of girls who have been traumatized this way and have a discussion about it.
Sure.
That would be more effective than taking these girls and these actresses and forcing them to do things on camera and through the script that are super questionable.
Right.
Super questionable. So when Netflix is coming out, like you're saying, and they're saying, hey, nope, this is what we say it is, we're defending this, and our perception is this is really poorly executed.
Right.
This is not accomplishing what it's supposed to be accomplishing, and the fact that you can't see it, it has to be for money. You're not coming out as an activist. You're coming out as a capitalist. You're coming out as someone who's just looking at this as a dollar way and just trying to make a good spin on it is how it's being played out right now.
Well, I think that Netflix really understands what they're being accused of.
Sure.
And I think that it could be that taking down the movie might be them conceding that they have participated in this. But I'm not really sure. It's a really weird. I just think they have so many titles and so many ways they can make money, and people love Netflix.
I think Netflix taking down the movie would be damaging to their other people that want to distribute on them as a network. I think it would be damaging to those relationships. I don't think it would be a good play for the consumers. I think it would be a bad play for their business model, and I think that's why they're coming down on that.
So do you think that studios would want to work with Netflix less if they take a film down like that?
Mm-hmm. I do. I think that it comes across as where you're like, hey, we have it. Netflix defending this is just defending studios. Netflix coming out and putting a strong arm saying, hey, no, we're not going to be bullied by cancel culture. We're not going to be bullied by this stuff that's happening. And they're putting an activist spin on it where we really believe in this in a deep way. Like, no, that's garbage. I think the reality is that they're defending studios. The reality is they're defending other people that are saying, hey, if we get something up there, if we make something controversial, like if it gets views, that's the reality of Cuties. It's trending top 10 in the US. I think it's third or fourth right now because of how much people are watching it, because of how much controversy. And I think Netflix is taking advantage of a good controversy.
More people have watched this movie because of the controversy than if Netflix had just released it on its own.
Right.
Like, people may not have even clicked on it. It might not have been this like crazy thing that it is, but because there's this massive controversy, it brought more attention. I would have never watched this movie ever if there hadn't been this massive controversy and Netflix hadn't dug their heels in and it was pertinent to this show.
Sure.
But I don't know, man.
Despite what Netflix is saying, I don't think that we can attribute a moral conscience to a corporation that large.
Sure.
There's so many moving parts. There's so many people. There's so many other things. And I think that it's been very interesting seeing them dig their heels in as hard as they have when there's been this much backlash about it. And I think that there are other things going on behind the scenes that we can't even get a look-see into. But I think that this has not been a positive play.
Right.
Without me understanding the finances behind it, it hasn't been a positive play. Now, we did have a question. When we talked about this, we first said, hey, guys, should we talk about Cuties? And then, hey, we've decided to talk about it. Do you have any questions for us in regards to this?
Right.
And go for it.
We got a great one from my friend Chase Myers. He was asking if we could talk about some situational comparison to other brands that have taken strong, unpopular stances on cultural or social issues and how that worked for or against them in the long run, more than just like Nike or Kaepernick, right? And so, I don't know. Let's take that situation, the Nike Kaepernick situation.
Sure.
Kaepernick was kneeling during the national anthem, caused a gigantic uproar, caused a big problem for the NFL and for everything else. And so he was pretty dangerous for the NFL's brand.
Sure.
And Nike decided to do an ad campaign with Kaepernick.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, they earned $6 billion because of this ad campaign.
Right.
And it's like, in this instance, Nike jumped into the middle of a controversial topic in our country, and they profited greatly from this. Now, this is probably more of like a tale of two cities kind of situation, whereas I think the Colin Kaepernick situation for sure benefited Nike. Obviously, earning $6 billion off of Kaepernick's like multi-million-dollar deal they signed with him is for sure
That's a very good return on investment.
It's a huge win, and they became more relevant with younger generations.
Sure.
But in this instance, again, and I say this every episode, it's like we got to wait for the numbers to come out. We got to see what Netflix's financial situation looks like in the next quarters. But it's like I don't know if this is going to be that kind of a situation for Netflix.
I don't think Netflix is going to get dinged as hard as people are attempting to. But when you're talking about Nike and Kaepernick and this being a tale of two cities, I think the big difference and juxtaposition here is that Nike took a stance on injustice, racial injustice. Netflix took a stance on pedophilia, is the current perception of that. And I think how that played out when you're defending that versus the other way, I think that that's a big reason that you get that kind of a boon on the other side. And so for businesses, from my perspective, when you're embroiled in a controversy, there are so many examples and ways that companies have responded to these controversies, some positive and some negative. And I think that you have to determine whether or not what you're communicating as a company is something you're worth tying to your brand. And Nike determined that what Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for was something they wanted to tie to their brand. Again, you and me are not going to bring politics in. This isn't even about that. This is just saying Nike took someone controversial, Colin Kaepernick, and they took a stance and they profited from it greatly. You have Netflix, who took something controversial like Cuties, and we don't know the financial outcome right now. Past the 600,000 people that have subscribed and their 8-time cancellation churn rate that's happened, we really don't know the impact that's taken place. But I think that other comparisons and brands have taken strong and popular stances on cultural and social issues. Like Nike, there's clearly a way to do it well where you can benefit and your business can benefit from the PR boom that happens when you throw your hat into the ring of a controversy. And I think that Netflix didn't play their cards correctly.
I mean, even bringing politics into this a little bit, we're seeing people on both sides of the aisle coming down on this film, which has been interesting. Like, there's obviously,
Cuties,
there are people that are supporting Netflix. They're saying, don't cancel Netflix.
You don't understand the intent.
You don't understand the intent of the movie, which, you get people going like, have you even seen the film? It's like, have you seen the film?
Exactly.
Like, have you seen it?
Right.
It's crazy. But, Senator Ted Cruz is wanting to go after Cuties and Netflix with the Justice Department and wanted to open up a criminal investigation. And I've seen like news about that for a couple of days. But what I thought was really interesting is I saw a tweet from Christine Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, and she goes, "Hey Netflix, from a customer and former ADA in SFDA's Child Abuse Sexual Assault Unit, Cuties hypersexualizes girls my daughter's age, no doubt to the delight of pedophiles like the ones I prosecuted. Cancel this, apologize, and work with experts to heal your harm. #cancel Netflix." So you're seeing people on very different sides of the aisle watching this going like, yeah, this is really far, and you did this with 11-year-olds.
Right. I think that what's really difficult is there's a conversation to be had around just being a distributor. Like Netflix is essentially becoming the YouTube of cinema and TV shows.
Sure.
So in terms of how much they host, what's a Netflix original versus something that they bought the rights to show on their platform, how much are they culpable or responsible for what a director filmed, a French director filmed out, and showed at the Sundance Festival that they got rights to? Like in terms of canceling Netflix, like things that get uploaded on YouTube. There's just controversial things that get uploaded on YouTube. How much is YouTube responsible for policing the content that they have on their platform?
Right.
Like clearly they're the only ones that can affect that. But also how much are we going to hold them responsible for stuff? Now it's a little bit different. Netflix is going out and buying the rights to this film. They actively sought it out and included it in their catalog versus YouTube, where I can go upload something controversial or terrible, and YouTube has to kind of catch it with their automated guidelines, So it's a little bit different, but I think that it's creating this conversation around we want to cancel Netflix because of something that they're actively defending that people on both sides of the aisles are saying is atrocious.
Right. I mean, I think that Netflix could have taken the approach of, well, we saw it as a Sundance award-winning film. We allowed it on our platform. once we saw what was in it, we took it off. We're really sorry that we did that. And people could have been like, oh, Netflix made a blunder.
Exactly.
It's the fact that they're defending it. They're actually coming out and defending the movie, which is what's making this so crazy. And you can go on and on about how, well, it won a Sundance Award. Well, the filmmaker that co-founded the Sundance Film Festival pled guilty to sexual abuse of a child and is going to be serving at least 6 years in prison. So I don't think the Sundance Award's got that much credibility either when your co-founder is getting in trouble for the very thing that we're talking about here. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a really wacky play, in my opinion, from Netflix.
Yeah, and as we're discussing this, I'm incredibly interested in hearing your guys' feedback on these topics too. We did a lot of debate internally on whether or not to talk about it, and let us know, where we came down on it.
Right. What do you guys think? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. We did our best to discuss the topic without getting way too gross or political. I don't think that we wanted to do that, but we really want to talk about Netflix and why it is just reprehensible for
how
them.
These kinds of decisions affect companies.
Yeah, it matters.
Your company, I hope not, but your company may become embroiled in a controversy, and how do you navigate that? And what is the impact on your brand when you line yourself up with that?
Right. When you apologize and retract what you've done, or you dig your heels in, you communicate different things. So when you retract your statement and you go back, you say, I'm wrong, I'm sorry, and luckily we're on a 24-hour news cycle and people are going to forget quickly. But when you dig your heels in to what you're doing, you need to understand that this is a hill that you got to be willing to die on.
100%.
You're willing to risk your company on this hill, right? And so it's important for other businesses and brands to take note of what's going on, because this could happen to them one day. So,
well, honestly, I think we hit everything that we needed to hit.
I think so too. And we'll go ahead and land the plane.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for listening to us and supporting us so far. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Stay tuned for weekly episodes. Drop fresh every Friday. Every Friday. Also, don't forget to like us on Facebook. We're doing a lot of community building where we'll take your questions and discuss them on the show like we have the last 3 episodes. We're just super excited to keep making this awesome content for you, and you can stay tuned for episode 5 of Disruption and Kindness next Friday. We love you guys. Thanks.